Hello, this is Tempo Afric TV Beyond the Headlines program, and I'm your host, Petros Haile. Today, our guest is SARA Larson. She's an outreach director for the Somali Museum of Minnesota. SARA is an anthropologist and a community advocate, has studied and served in community development in East Africa, Eastern Europe, and the United States. SARA earned a BA and her master's in anthropology from Yale University, where she conducts research in the cultural anthropology of Africa. Am I right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We also plan to do a follow-up on this program, so if we left it very brief and short, don't get discouraged.
Sounds good.
Okay. The Somali Museum of Minnesota. This is something that has been done for the first time within an African community, right?
That's right, as far as we know.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, the museum is actually just located on Lake Street in Minneapolis, and a lot of people haven't quite found it yet because we're in a rented space in a larger building. But the museum actually started as a project back in 2009 when my boss, our director, Osman Ali, started collecting artifacts from nomadic society in Somalia, and he started doing exhibitions and lectures at schools around the community.
Oh, okay, okay. So since 2009?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Before I go to a different question, so SARA is also a performing musician.
That's true.
And studies traditional folk music of Eastern Europe. Again, right. If you can tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I guess I've realized more and more lately that maybe my mission on Earth is about kind of digging into all of our roots and cultural sense of where we come from and exploring the way that that helps us build strength and build our communities now. So my family background is from Eastern Europe, and about 5 years ago I started studying traditional music from Serbia and Hungary and Russia and Poland, and I'm now part of a group called the Nightingale Trio that performs that music.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah. Do you have a record out already? Okay,
we do.
Okay.
I'll get you one later.
Maybe we can play it in the break time here.
Sure.
For the TV show. Okay, the Somali community. I remember the Somalians start migrating to Minnesota in early 1990s. And now there's roughly an estimate of over 75,000 Somalians here.
Yeah.
And this is the only museum they have. If you can tell us in a very general sense, how integrated is the Somali community with Minnesotans, native Minnesotans?
It's hard to say, especially as someone coming from outside the community myself. Because for me, working with the museum is so much about learning and getting to know the community more and more. And right now it feels like I'm just in this phase of being so grateful to people wanting to teach me about it. But there certainly is a problem of, some people would say isolation, and some people would say prejudice, and some people would say just crossed wires in terms of understanding what the community needs and what the community wants. And there isn't even agreement within the Somali community about what things should look like. But for me, as a European American Minnesotan, I definitely see a lot of prejudice by people against like what are customs within the community, the way that people walk down the street, even the way that people engage in politics. So there's, a lot of stereotypes about violence and bad issues that we really have to overcome.
I would say partly it's because of what's going on in Somalia, and human natures tend to put everything together, the bad elements with that of the great majority of the Somalian community. I'm assuming that that's what we see here locally in Minnesota as well. But, the sad part about prejudice is they don't distinguish. The very nature of a prejudiced person is there's no distinguish from bad or good or anything in between. So I pass for Somalian. I look like for Somalian, so I faced so many times people assuming that I'm Somalian, and the next thing is I'm one of those bad people.
Mm-hmm.
So this museum concept
Mm-hmm.
is in developing stage, I believe.
Yeah.
You think that would, if not eliminate, reduce the prejudice of the Minnesotans to a greater extent?
Mm-hmm. That's what we hope, for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, you're right. You said it, normally when you show your culture, people tend to be more acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's what it will serve.
Definitely.
Yeah. Let's go to your programs.
Mm-hmm.
You do have exhibitions, galleries, and tours. What are those?
Right.
What do you show on those exhibitions?
So the museum, I mentioned it started off my boss, Osman, working out of the back of his van, but we now actually have a gallery space
Okay.
where we have a collection of 5 different galleries of mostly artifacts from nomadic culture in Somalia. Because a lot of people, even though there's a lot of diversity within Somalia of types of cities and towns and villages, a lot of people have a lot of pride about the nomadic camel herding culture. So a lot of what we talk about focuses on that culture. And so there's the galleries that are set up in the museum that people can come visit and stop by and bring their families and look at. We also have 2 full traditional houses
Okay.
built in the museum.
Okay.
So one is called an Akal Somali, and it's the traditional nomadic house. And that one, it's built out of a frame of branches and some piece of wood that are wrapped in leather and then woven mats over the top. And it really is just as it would have been for someone
Somali.
who keeps camels in Somalia.
Okay.
And the other is called a mudul, and it's more of a village-style house. So people can go and walk inside those and kind of experience what it would feel like to be there.
It's more like the teepee they do in this country for Native Americans.
It's similar. Yeah, it's a different shape. It's more like the nomadic house is a rounded shape.
Yeah.
House.
Okay. I should know because Somalia is next door to me.
Right, yeah, totally.
Yeah. And the other things you do is you hold cultural events.
Right, yeah, so we have musicians from town come in and perform, and we've had poets, and we had a really wonderful event last summer about food traditions.
Okay.
So different people, it was kind of like a potluck. Everybody brought their own classic family meal from all different cultures. And then we had the traditional Somali, like odka meat and porridges, and then it just evolved from being a meal together into a dance party, which was the best part about the event.
I was going to say the spaghetti because I go to Somali restaurant with spaghetti.
Totally.
But it's not authentic Somalian.
Yeah.
Well, Somali was part of the Somali was a colony of Italy.
Right.
So was Eritrea, and so was Libya. So I'm sure we received a lot of their food items from Italians. So I can relate to Somalians when I in a coffee shop where we drink a lot of latte. So okay. So that's what we do, except minus the spaghetti, I guess.
Okay. Cool.
And another thing is you also give classes and workshops on Somali.
Right.
How does that go?
Well, because part of the mission of the museum is not just to have these things preserved and kind of behind glass, but really the mission of the museum is especially targeted towards the next generations of Somali Americans and preserving the culture through not letting it disappear, but also keeping it as a living thing. So we really want young people who were born here or grew up here to feel like they can be immersed in that culture and experience it. So there's a lot of really beautiful craft traditions and art, as I mentioned, music and poetry. And there's also a weaving tradition. So the mats that actually cover the house are made by women totally by hand without a loom or anything. They just kind of make the frame of it themselves and weave in and out. So we teach classes in that weaving tradition as well.
And men are allowed to...
Men are allowed to try it.
Okay.
But our teachers are grandmothers, and they're all masterful artists and really amazing. And they're part of kind of a weaving club among the 5 of them, and they come and teach the classes.
Oh, yeah. It makes sense to have grandmothers and elderly, to teach it because that was their way of life, I guess.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Another interesting concept that I found was the mobile exhibition and lectures. When you say mobile, you go across the state, is that what it is? Or
Right, mostly
Okay.
across the Twin Cities area. But a lot of people either haven't yet heard about the museum's location,
Okay.
or they can't come. Maybe it's, a family that has a lot of kids to bring by, or a lot of schools wish they could bring their students to the museum. But if that's not possible, we bring the museum to them.
Okay.
So we'll
okay.
go to schools or mosques or community centers or libraries or the Minnesota State Senate and bring some of these traditional artifacts and talk about all of them and tell stories from that lifestyle and talk about why
Right.
we have to preserve and hold on to this.
Okay, okay. Mainly we're talking about the programming, and you can have those programs, but if you don't have an outreach, to expose them, to show them to the outside world, you can't confine it to Somalians only, and that's where you come. So you're the outreach director. So how successful are you, or what are your efforts bringing the Somali cultures to the bigger community in Minnesota?
It's actually been a really easy job in
Easy
some
job.
respects so far,
Okay.
because so many people who are Minnesotans who are not Somali really realize how important it is to learn about the Somali culture, because people are so visible and the community is so large. And even though there are folks from all different countries around the continent of Africa and around the world here, there's something about the Somali community that has really kind of both frightened some people, I think, and
Yeah.
also inspired some people to want to make connections.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of demand from especially Minnesotans with European heritage to learn what this community is about. But a lot of them don't have a venue to learn about that, or they are somehow scared or feel inhibited to just go talk to people and ask. Like a lot of my friends say, oh yeah, I've noticed there's all those coffee shops where all the Somalis hang out, but I've never gone into one.
Yeah.
And my response is like, well, why not? You should just go. But having the space that's the museum kind of makes a safe venue for people to have their first introduction. They can go and either kind of sit quietly and look at the things and read about them, or get a tour and kind of be guided through it. And having that first kind of introduction and safe space for them to be able to ask questions that maybe they think are dumb, but they really, they want to ask, what kinds of foods do people eat? Simple things. People really do respond to having that chance to come learn. So,
That makes sense, yeah. Breaking the barrier is the most difficult part of it. I notice there's the one coffee shop that I often go. Americans or Minnesotans will come, they go pick up their coffee, they don't even look around.
Yeah, they stand in line just kind of like,
So they're
okay.
out.
Right.
So, yeah, you're right. I mean, the museum is a safe place. I totally agree. Yeah, once you museum, and the rest will follow. Hoping. If you look at the history of the U.S. as well, how do you get rid of prejudice? As policy is one of them. The policy is there. Nobody's going to discriminate against Somalians on the basis of the policy. The culture is where it comes, where the problem is. You can enforce the law, but if the culture is not ready, I don't care how many laws that you're imposing on the people, it's not going to be respected.
Totally.
And I think that is what's happening. Am I making sense here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think also you need to not just convince people, but just show them that this community is not a problem. It's not this group of people who dumped themselves here and need everybody's help.
Yeah.
And that's a really big part of the stereotypes, I think. And so the idea that, this community has a museum, has a beautiful, educational, rich, amazing cultural institution. Part of, this isn't on our website as part of our mission, but I think that does help accomplish something good, that people see, the Somali Museum, it's like this community is not just taking resources from us and needing our help. It's like they have a place that is a cultural resource for us to learn. Yeah. And the fact that everyone has something to contribute and share from that community like, it seems like that would be obvious,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
I think that you do need to show people that
Yeah.
as part of that cultural shift.
Yeah.
Because until they really talk to someone and experience something positive in return, this, again, more the European American perspective,
Oh, yeah.
they're just going to, be blocked by that lack of connection until that happens. So,
That's a tough job to do, but I wish you
Yeah.
all the luck. No, I don't mean to hammer on the same subject again and again. It is true, especially if you're from Africa. It could be my bias on this one. People tend to be reserved, Yeah, there's issues of war, civil wars and stuff like that. So prejudice comes into play. I'm not taking prejudice as extremely negative. Sometimes it becomes a natural process.
Sure, yeah.
We can be prejudiced as well, let alone with Europeans, but among ourselves in Africa. And one way to exit from that kind of prejudice and become a part of society is to educate them.
Yeah.
To educate them, tell them. And Somalians in this community, they're becoming an asset. They're not a burden anymore.
Totally.
I see Somalians contributing in many ways for the Minnesota economy and for their own, since they're becoming a citizenship. I know I'm getting carried away. But what triggered all this interest about anthropology? And you traveled to Africa, right?
I did, yeah.
Okay, which part did you go?
The first time I traveled to the continent, I went as a volunteer to a community in Kenya, and then also spent a little bit of time in Uganda. That was my first time.
Oh, okay, Uganda. Did you learn Swahili a little bit?
I did, yeah. I was actually taking Swahili as my language course in college.
Oh, okay.
So I'm able to talk to people a
little bit. Yeah, okay.
A little. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is what triggered you to to get into the African culture. But originally you went there for a development purpose.
That's right. Yeah.
That's what your interest is.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us.
Well, I guess part of my background is that I did grow up here in Minnesota. I went to Minnetonka High School in the suburbs, and I had one best friend who, she and I just felt really both limited by the perspective that we had being in the suburbs of the Twin Cities and feeling really inspired to be more connected to the world. So we, would go to the library and borrow world music CDs, and it didn't matter which country. It was like anything except the United States. We would listen to that. And I also grew up in a multi-faith family, so my parents did a really good job of not just teaching us about the religions that were in our family, but we'd go to celebrations and festivals in the Sikh community and Hindu community and Buddhist. So I always grew up being like, oh yeah, learning about the people of the world is so great. And I'm really grateful to my parents for having done that.
Okay.
But I guess as I grew up and became a teenager and kind of started to come of age, it seemed like the way to keep learning about other cultures and parts of the world as a career, the best way to do that seemed to be going and trying to help people. So I kind of am embarrassed now to say that I was part of that cohort of white American women who wanted to go, like, save Africa.
Okay.
But when I was young, that really did seem like it was important and a significant thing to do. And I know now, I think I was more motivated by getting to just connect and meet people. But at the time, I did really want to go make a difference.
Okay.
And we were talking about this a bit before the show, that when I was there, I realized that a lot of the development work that happens is not based on partnerships and is not really answering the call and the leadership of people who are there I was in Nyanza province in Kenya, and there's like brilliant programs and ideas run by people from there for people there that just don't have any international money coming in, but are better in so many ways than the international ones. And unfortunately, there's just so much money and political power and all of this stuff involved in the American programs that I got really turned off by that when I went and, started to think more about how maybe this could be done better.
Better. That's why
So-
you chose in the cultural field.
Mhm,
Can't-
I think
okay.
so. Yeah.
And then you went all the way to the Yale University to get your master's.
Yeah.
This is great. And another thing on a personal note is you have this dual heritage.
Mhm.
You have a Jewish as well as Switzerland.
Yeah, Swedish.
Swedish,
Christian, yeah.
Swedish Christian, okay.
Yeah.
Does that help in any way to connect with people of different race or ethnicity, or your own history?
Yeah.
For example,
Mm.
I was born in Ethiopia,
Right.
but I'm an Eritrean, so it gave me an advantage to know Ethiopians as well as Eritreans.
Mhm.
I call that an asset.
Mm.
Does that apply to you? The fact that you have this dual heritage?
I think so. I think it first of all made me feel a bit like a minority when I was growing up,
Uh-huh.
because when I was in school, everyone around me was either Christian or Western European heritage. So even though, I read as like, I'm a white American, I really felt kind of singled out as being the one person who wasn't
Mhm.
that when I was growing up, and felt a lot of connection to that part of my family, but didn't really have outlets for it.
Mhm, mhm.
But now I've felt a lot of connections to people because I think there's a somewhat of an affinity between Muslims in Minnesota and Jewish community in Minnesota, just again by kind of being more of minorities.
Yeah, yeah.
And my name is Sarah, and that comes from,
Religious
stories of both of those traditions. And I like telling people that I'm named for my great-grandmother, whose
Yeah.
name was Sarah, and my great-grandfather's name was Abraham. So I
Mhm.
actually had Sarah and Ibrahim as my ancestors. So that kind of becomes a talking point for getting to know people, and telling some of my family's story and evoking those names becomes a connection for a lot of people.
does.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's amazing. I did not say it, but I said a Jewish woman working for the Somali community. But
Yeah.
this is a
Interesting.
perfect explanation.
Mm.
Human beings. There's a way to connect,
Mhm.
and if that is your connection and it's working, you're the outreach director for that community.
Mhm.
But earlier you were saying, like you go for a development,
Mhm.
but you see how the connection is just like a charity type of work,
Right.
rather
yeah.
than uplifting Africans to reach to the level of others.
Mhm.
You are one of the few luckiest one to go there to Africa. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
To,
yeah.
to witness it firsthand
Mhm.
of how Africans relate to each other, how Africans related to foreigners.
Mhm.
I see the Chinese right now. They call it partnership,
Mhm.
which you just mentioned it earlier. Would you envision to Africa in the future, like you're starting from cultural stuff, but
Mm.
to connect with Africa is more of a partnership type of deal?
Yeah, that's what I would hope for.
That would hope for,
And
okay.
I actually, when I was in school studying anthropology, a lot of my professors were really, I realize now, were really trying to teach that. So in a lot of our programs, we were learning about kind of failed development projects and, cases where an organization went in to try to help agriculture in a region, and
Mhm.
they were teaching women how to grow a certain crop that, based on the culture there, the men traditionally grow. So people would go to the classes and then just like throw out the seeds and not listen to what they said because of that simple gap that this foreigner didn't do, of just asking do you guys do this? What is it that you guys want? And I'm grateful that I approach development from the anthropology perspective, because I think people who want to learn about the world
Mhm.
through this,
Yep.
through talking to people and culture,
Yeah.
they enter in immediately from relationships and respect and being a host and being a guest and all of these really universal, basic, right ways of interacting.
Mhm.
Whereas people who study these things, I think, from more of an economic or political perspective, come in with models and ideas of how they think it's going to work, and they go in pursuit of outcomes and success. And sometimes they even skip shaking hands and meeting each other completely. And I think maybe it's slower, maybe it takes more time, but really we don't know what direction the earth and the human race is going in. So it's more worth it to kind of be humans together and move forward together into the future than to try to control what it's going to look like. And I would like to see a day where that becomes the model for the way that everything globally is done.
At least the awareness is already started. Just like you said, colonialism has been tried, failed, neocolonialism.
Over and over
and again. Now Africans are asserting their rights. It's becoming. But we need that, the connection, the cultural connection. Who are Africans? How do they want to deal with the foreigners, Europeans or the US, or for that matter, the East Europeans? I think we're in the right direction, but this, the grassroots approach for all this problem is very vital.
Yeah, I agree.
And knowing the person, knowing the individual, knowing the culture, knowing how he wanted to be treated or she wanted to be treated, and how she wanted to treat others. Thank you for that information.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Yeah, one thing, just to add to that, just about the Twin Cities here, is something that I've really appreciated so much, is how much there is like solidarity and a lot of leadership from within the many different African communities. Like everything from people who are being elected to political office to teachers and social workers and the hundreds probably of nonprofit organizations that have been founded, to this TV station, and the poets and artists. It's like really a happening scene here. And once you're within it, and that I'm lucky enough to be as an outsider, once you're within that community, it's like there's no need for charity. Like there's so much strength and activity going on. It's like all African leadership of African issues all the time. It's so cool.
This is great. But on the transition, we need, this is my judgment, we need people like you. We need a person who can mediate, who can show things, who had first-hand experience, and who cares on top of everything. So what's your vision maybe down 5 years from now? You're going to work on the museum, develop it to a next level?
Yeah, I hope so. It's hard to say. I'm not very good at making 5-year plans.
Okay.
But definitely in the near future, our biggest goal right now for the museum is to have a space. So I mentioned right now we're right here on Lake Street, but we are renting rooms from another company. And we really have this beautiful vision of the Somali Museum having its own building, brick and mortar space that you can walk up to and say, this is the Somali Museum, where we'll have space for all of our exhibitions, all of our galleries, classrooms, a documentary film viewing room, everything that you could possibly dream of for cultural learning. So we're working on that now, but it is a kind of a slow process of raising money and raising awareness and putting together a coalition of people who will help that happen. But we're definitely putting that vision out into the air to say whoever is inspired by this project and wants to be part of it and help, now is the time where anything that anyone gives can really help make this happen. So hopefully 5 years from now we'll see a beautiful Ako Somali shaped museum, somewhere in South Minneapolis that children and their families will be coming in and out at the door and learning.
It will happen. It will happen.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. It will happen. Not only your experiment with the Somali community will have an effect on other African communities here locally in Minnesota. And Minnesota is becoming a very diverse community. So your success is the success of the rest of Africans. I hope sooner or later people will realize that we're an asset, we're not a liability.
Absolutely.
That would. Another thing that I wanted to mention is the programs. We talked about the program in general sense, and you have education, which is categorized in 4 cultural art classes, school tours, Somali Culture 101, which is all encompassed in one mobile culture show. We talked about it, and the nomadic artifacts, the huts, the visit. How do people will come to your show? Is there a schedule that is outlined?
I'm glad you mentioned that
Yeah.
because I would have forgotten. So the museum is actually open 4 days a week, on Tuesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays.
Okay.
So people are free to just come stop by. The doors open
Okay.
from 3 to 7 on Tuesdays and Fridays, and 1 to 5 on Saturdays and Sundays.
Okay.
And we've had just some really wonderful groups of people coming by already.
Already.
Like everyone brings really good questions and their own stories of either being an immigrant or, having relationships with people in the Somali community, and they come and really enjoy it.
Okay. And you also have a rental space?
Hmm.
Okay. How does that work?
That works by a lot of people who want to have some kind of cultural background for events they hold or even photo shoots.
Oh, okay.
We do rent the museum space for people to either set up their cameras and take pictures there or have a dinner event, or we also have a conference room. So we have some organizations rent the conference room as well.
Okay, I just want to pass this one to my boss Malik of Tempo Afric. If you plan to do something, it is available. He can talk to
Definitely.
you, and okay.
Yeah, there's a really beautiful backdrop of 2 murals that were painted by 2 local artists, Aziz Osman and Marahe.
Okay.
And they painted these scenes that are just gorgeous of what the landscape looks like in both northern and southern Somalia.
Okay.
And then having the traditional houses there and all the artifacts, it really is a kind of inspiring setting. We've even had artists come who are like working on pieces about Somalia, and they just sit in that space and can imagine themselves there.
I think I saw part of the artwork on your website.
Right, yep.
Speaking of website, the Somali Museum of Minnesota is on 1516 East Lake Street, Suite 11, 011, Minneapolis, Minnesota 55407. Telephone is 612-234-1625. That's somalimuseum.mn@gmail.com. We can also display this on the screen later on.
Great.
But I really to thank you on behalf of Tempo Afric, and particularly Beyond the Headlines program. Sarah Larson was our guest today. Thank you and we will do this again.
Yeah,
for
thank you
sure.
very much.
Thanks again.
My pleasure.
On this note, we'll end up our program. We'll see you with a different guest next week. Thank you for watching.